Well, welcome everyone to our webinar today. My name is Kim Semensma, and I'm the Professional Learning and Projects Coordinator at Ieaa, and I look after the fellowship program and our online modules. On behalf of our panel today, I'd like to welcome everyone. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that this webinar is being hosted and recorded on the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and I wish to acknowledge them as the traditional owners and pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. I also acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands on which you all work today and the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people participating in this webinar. Just a few housekeeping items before we start. We have time scheduled at the end for questions after the panel discussion, so please put your questions in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen to ensure they are seen. So not the chat, but the Q&A. If you do have a question for a specific panelist, please also mention their name in your question. You're also going to have a few polls pop up on your screen during the webinar, and they are all anonymous, so please do participate for our data. Finally, a recording of today's session will be available for all registered participants. I'll be sending that along with my PowerPoint slides later this week. So today's webinar is designed to help you accelerate in your fellowship program. We understand a lot of our members have started the process, but have found that they're meeting some of the same pain points and maybe are a bit stuck. We also know that some people may have given up during these challenging times. So today in the webinar, participants are going to hear from Danielle Hartridge, Rebecca Cousins, Alec Vininsky, and Elena Williams, who have all achieved various levels of the Ieaa Fellowship and how they completed that process. So through a bit of a panel style Q&A, they're going to share their tips and tactics for choosing the right activities, where to seek that evidence, and what benefits they found along the way. So just a brief introduction of our panel members. So Danielle is an advisor, project manager, and currently an Ieaa senior fellow. Danielle has 30 years experience working in international education, where she held senior roles in international student support and ESOS compliance. A past president of ISANA, International Education Association, and former convener of the Ieaa Admissions and Compliance Network. Danielle works closely with international education providers, offering consultation and advice on international education matters related to the international student experience and ESOS compliance. She is also a current Ieaa board member. Rebecca is a PhD candidate at Griffith and an Ieaa associate fellow. Over the past decade, Rebecca has held various roles within Griffith International. In recent years, her primary focus has been on outbound student mobility, which has led her to commence a PhD with Griffith. Her research explores the impact of study abroad and virtual mobility on student employability and career development. Ellie is Director, Australia-Indonesia Consulting, and a PhD candidate at ANU, and an Associate Fellow. Ellie's research examines the impact of student mobility and DFAT-funded higher education programs on Australia-Indonesia relationship building. Between 2013 and 2017, she served as the Indonesia-based resident director for the Australian Consortium for In-Country Indonesian Studies, or CICIS, and since then has held roles with the University of Melbourne, the Victorian Department of Education, and AFS Australia, advising on learning abroad in Indonesia. Ellie currently serves as a board member with the Australia-Indonesia Institute at DFAT. And finally, Alec is a partner at Edified and the head of Client Relations Australasia, ETS TOEFL, and an Ieaa Fellow. At Edified, Alec leads on student recruitment, marketing, compliance projects. At ETS, he supports admissions and recruitment teams with student outreach with English language testing and supports Pacific Islands with remote testing opportunities. Alec has significant experience in the international ed sector over the last 20 years, with over a decade at UNSW Sydney as Exec Director International. He has previously held positions with Charles Sturt and UTS, as well as several years based in China with Study Group. Alec holds a Doctor of Education from USC and a Master of International Law from the University of Sydney. So now I'm going to just take you through a few quick slides. Some of you may have already seen this, but I wanted to ensure that everybody had a basic knowledge of the fellowship program before we started our Q&A. So next slide, please. So just wanted to give you a screenshot. This is the landing page for the fellowship program. And this is where you can find all of the information about our ambassadors. We have a nice video about fellowship ambassadors, our activities table about earning the points, and our wonderful Hall of Fame. Next slide, please. Now, this is a very important part of the website. This is our activities points table. So this is where you find all of the information, and it's your best friend as you're completing your fellowship, because it gives you all of the categories that you can enter into your fellowship program to earn the points. If you think of any activities that aren't existing in the table, you can always let IEAA know, and we're quite open to adding new ones. I also want to note there at the top that there are now a minimum number of points that each person must engage with IEAA activities for each level of the fellowship. That's to ensure that people are engaging with IEAA. I'm also going to share our email address at the end, so you will be able to send us communication. Next slide, please. Let's go ahead and enter for me. So these are the three main categories for the fellowship, which are education, experience, and engagement. And then if we go ahead and enter again, please. These are just a few of the examples under each category of the activities. So you can see, hopefully, there's pretty good spread. For education, we don't need them to be specific to international education because it's too hard to determine what degree is international education. So that area is quite open. However, the rest of the categories do tend to need to be specific to international education, like the different boards and committees, that kind of thing. Once you've reached a certain goal in the fellowship as well, it's yours forever as long as you maintain an IEAA membership. Next slide, please. Now, we do have an FAQ page for the fellowship. It's a little bit light on at the moment. It's something we are going to be working on. But if you think there's something that everybody is going to be asking, the same sort of question that's not appearing there, again, feel free to send that feedback through, because we want to make sure that it's really helpful to all people starting the fellowship or working through it. Next slide, please. Now, hopefully everybody is aware that we also offer some really great online learning modules. These are open to both members and non-members of IEAA and are really an excellent way for everyone to get online and further their learning, particularly in different streams of the sector that you might not be working in. So let's say you work in learning abroad, but you're quite interested in T&E. Our T&E module would be a really good one for you to try. And it's also very good, of course, for anyone regionally based, and it was great during lockdown because we didn't have to go anywhere to go through those modules. Next slide, please. And here they are. So there's 10 modules. Module 1 and 2 are quite introductory. They give you a bit of an overarching bit of information if you're new to the sector. We've had some great feedback about Module 1 for people who are just joining the sector. If you're really into data, Module 2, and as I said, the rest are quite specific to our different network streams. Now, we are doing an update of the modules this year. We're using some content experts to review and then update some of the documents and content because we do realize it's starting to be a bit outdated. So if you are undertaking a module and notice something like that, feel free to make a note and send through that feedback. And we're happy to pass that on to the people doing those updates. All right, so now we're going to move into our panel. So I'm going to welcome them all onto the screen. And there they all are. So we're going to ask them a few questions, and they're going to give you guys their feedback. And then, like I said, after that, we will open up to audience questions. So feel free to put those into the Q&A box as we go. So first off, panel, I'd like to ask you, what was your plan when you started entering your activities for the fellowship? Did you strategically choose them, or did you just work through that activities table? And I'm going to throw over to Danielle to start this one. Oh, you're on mute though.
I'm always on mute when I speak. Yep. So thank you very much, Kim. It's great to be here today to share our experiences with the fellowship, getting our fellowship. I started with the highest point activities. I thought I'll go through the list and I'll look at the ones that give me the most amount of points, and I'll work through that way. So things like years working in international education, being on committees and awards and things like that. so that I thought I'll start there, and then that will make me feel a little better, because hopefully I'll see that I've got a few points, rather than starting with the ones that earn like 20 points or 100 points and things like that. So that's sort of the approach that I took. I didn't work through the list in order. I looked at the points.
Great, thanks, Danielle. And Beck, how did you go about that?
I was a little bit different to Danielle. I did work through it a bit more in order. I actually used that activities table that's already up there. So there's, 3 themes of education, experience, and engagement. I just used that as, I guess, my checklist. And as I went through, I found that I kind of went down these rabbit holes of trying to find evidence, but went back to the activities table to kind of get me back on track and work through some more activities.
Excellent, thanks, Beck. And Ellie, I think you also did a little bit similar to Beck.
Yeah, quite similar, and also same with Danielle. So starting with the sort of the higher number point earners, I guess, to begin with, as a time-saving exercise. But I think going along the way, yeah, just adding those things in. And then as I was going, I was like, oh, that's right, I forgot that I'd done this, or I forgot that I'd done that. And sort of cross-referencing it, I suppose, with job applications you might have done recently. In my case, it was also about the same time that I was applying for my PhD. So a lot of the documentation I needed for both applications. So going along at the same time and looking and thinking, oh, I hadn't thought of that, or I didn't know that that could actually be an activity. And as Kim said before, that idea of adding new activities all the time. So I had a couple of activities, for example, of volunteering and doing mentoring in the Australia-Indonesia youth space. So I actually just wrote to the Secretariat to see whether that could be included as an activity. And I know that volunteering has since been included. So I think also thinking outside, like using the guidelines and using the activity guidelines to start with, but then also as you're going, definitely thinking outside the box and thinking, hang on, that's kind of an international education activity. I wonder if I can use that too.
Excellent, really good point. So the next question then was, did you enter all of those activities before doing your evidence, which is required for the majority, or did you go and do your evidence as you moved along? Danielle, I think you had something to say about how you did that one.
Yes, so I went through it not necessarily looking for the evidence to start off with. I just listed what I could remember. I initially did like a brain dump. I just sort of sat there and I just tried to think and reflect over the years, what had I done? I looked at some of the websites and so forth where I was going through, and I could easily find the evidence. I would put the link in or put the information in. But if I didn't have it, I wasn't going to stress about it at that point in time. I'll just put the activity in, come back later and find the evidence.
Excellent. And that's actually how I did mine as well. As I was doing the activities and trying to add in everything, when I knew I had that file saved, I just uploaded it at the time so I wouldn't forget. But then you do need to go back for anything you haven't added and make sure that you add it in so that I'm not harassing you at time of assessment. Did anyone else have a comment about their evidence, or did that cover everyone's own?
I might jump in there, Kim. Yeah, sure. I used probably a little bit of a combination. So my memory is like a sieve. So as soon as I thought about something, I definitely wrote it down. But I found, particularly with conferences, when I was looking for one thing and I happened to find something else at the same time, then I would be saving the evidence as I was going along. So if I had the evidence at hand for whatever reason, I definitely saved it so I didn't have to go back and look for it. But yeah, I was just writing things as I went along and remembered them as well, just so I didn't forget them completely.
Excellent. Thanks, Beck. So the next one there is about where to find evidence. That's definitely a question I get from a lot of our members. Where did you find it and what did you use for the various activities? So maybe we'll start with Alec for this one.
Thanks, Kim. Look, I've got a couple tips. Maybe, first is just make sure you search all of your email accounts, not just your work account. So you may have CC'd or forwarded a confirmation to your personal email at one stage. I used to always do that before if I had to go to an offshore, overseas conference, or even an onshore one, just so I had a backup record somewhere. Definitely search your laptop or cloud storage. You may have saved a conference confirmation or something somewhere. So try to just do a variety of searches, of word searches. One of the things I found really, really useful was the AIEC website itself, because it has historical information of previous conferences and schedules. So if you were a panel or on a panel or a presenter, your name may be in a PDF online from a previous conference schedule, and you can show that as evidence. So, my memory is a bit fuzzy at times. So I was thinking, did I present on XYZ in Melbourne or in Adelaide? I couldn't remember. So I went on to the past conference webpage, and it led me to exactly what I needed. I was able to download that and just include that as part of evidence.
Excellent. Thanks, Alec. And Beck, I think you had a few other tips for this one.
Yeah, now that I think about it, I had pretty much an easier go at it because I worked for the same employer for the past 10 years or so. Excuse me, just coughing. So I had access to my emails and my calendar for a long history there. So I used my emails and I used my calendar a lot. I was really specific with my search terms both in searching the calendar and my emails, because I know if you type in a conference, you'll have a gazillion things come up, and a lot of them is promotional things as opposed to your registration. So I would be specific and say things like, registration confirmed, or even tax invoice or something like that, that was unique to actually confirming a registration. And it took a few goes. That was really, for me, probably the hardest part, to collect all that data, just because, like all of us, we've just got thousands and thousands of archived emails. So I think it's just being a bit more strategic and thoughtful about the words that you use. And, when I was searching as well, I would use specific terms in the quotation marks. So it looks for the term exactly how it's laid out, especially if it's a phrase. That helps to narrow things down. And like Alex said, I also looked at conferences like AIC and IEAA and tried to refresh my memory and, go back through those registrations and activities associated with those.
Excellent. Thanks, Beck. Nellie?
Yeah, can I just jump in on that? I think similar to what Alec and Beck have both said about going back through your emails and through your calendar, the calendar is not to be underestimated. I had so many moments where I was like, I know I spoke at that IEAA thing, or there was, the Learning Abroad Forum, and that was in Brisbane. Then we went, when I was still with the Chichis, and we went and did a kind of roadshow, and we went and spoke at something at Sunshine Coast, and then we spoke at something, down in Melbourne that same trip, or down in Sydney. So looking then back through that week in my calendar, I was like, oh my gosh, that was a crazy week. But B, it also helped me to track the actual speaking engagements that I could then use as activities. So number one, looking through the calendar, or two, I think also speaking with former colleagues or former team members about what you were doing. That was very helpful. And secondly, I don't know if this applies to others, I'm sure it does, but also looking at media engagements. So I had to do a lot of speaking and a lot of radio interviews and, pieces in newspapers and things for my previous role about Australia-Indonesia education. And so they, of course, all counted as evidence as well in engagement and contributing knowledge. So I was actually able to then go back through and see when that was published and include those links as well. So looking through the calendar, looking through previous media engagements as well, I think is a good tip as well.
Excellent, thanks. And I think you'd even mentioned your CV. Often people will put things onto their CV and sort of forget about it. Maybe you've listed all the articles you've written towards the end. So definitely reviewing older CVs too.
That's right. Sorry, I forgot to mention that. So yeah, the CV, I think as well, like I kind of have a sort of a master CV, which is where I dump everything. And then, depending what job you're applying for, or whether it's academic or professional, taking out the bits that you need. And so going back to that kind of master one, I was like, oh yeah, I forgot that I did that, or I forgot that there was that in there. So that's really useful as well.
Excellent, thanks. And Danielle, you had I think another tip in there as well.
Yeah, well, a little bit, some aspects similar to Alec, Beck and Al, in terms of going back and looking at past programs and things like that, particularly when it's on the website, AIEC programs where, you might have forgotten that you've done something. I'd been involved with Ieaa, so I had done quite a bit through Ieaa, which their website's really good in terms of keeping records of all the past conferences and even past IEA forums, so being involved with the Emissions and Compliance Network was very helpful. But one of the things I think we discovered just before we jumped online with this session when we were talking beforehand is that Kim and I don't have a research background, unlike our other panelists who are a little bit maybe more thorough and methodical in their way of collating their information and so forth. So I was relying on everything that was out there and what I could find online, because I perhaps wasn't as organised. So having to go through that. So I would go through all of those programs and it would remind me of things that I had done, but also social media. You know, I often get, you know, there's certain times of the year, you know, that something will pop up and, you know, that social media, oh, I went to that, or something, you know, similar along those lines of bringing back those memories of things that you may have forgotten in the past, which triggers something as well. So I'm sure that happens for many with your social media and looking back on previous years.
Yeah, definitely. And people tagging you on LinkedIn
Yeah,
and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Well, and I think also for me, and something I say to a lot of people when I write to them, is that Google is your friend. It's amazing when you Google your name plus IEAA or your name plus one of the other conferences, that kind of thing, things will pop up. Like I had forgotten that I had done a panel until it popped up on Google. So definitely that's quite helpful. We also have a few hints in that activity table. So if you look along the right side, sometimes, or in the sort of parentheses under the description, you can get some ideas there. And then of course, what's really great is since we launched the fellowship in September 2019, all IEAA activities that you attend automatically populate into your fellowship. So you don't have to worry about that. And we also have a list of all of the IEAA activities that you would have participated in from 2013 onward. Those between 2013 and September 2019, you do have to enter manually, but we can often verify your attendance at those sorts of things. So there's no evidence necessarily required on those ones.
Can I just maybe throw in one more thing, Kim? I think
Definitely.
we do rely on a lot that's sort of online, but, you know, when you sort of get to be as old as me and, you know, before all of these things went online, you do need to perhaps go to some organisations that, you know, you've had involvement with and get them to write a letter for you as well, which is what I did with my Ieaa involvement, because I'd been on the committee and president and so forth. None of that was actually online. So I did go and ask them for a letter. So that's another thing that you can do.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, and you can jump to our next one. And I was going to say I actually had old badges from conferences, so I was able to use some of that for evidence as well when I moved on. But yeah, so the next question then sort of jumps on what Danielle was mentioning. If you've changed jobs, if you're not like Beck and been at Griffith for 10 years, you know, and you don't have those old registration emails or attendance records or something to show the presentations, you know, what do you do? How do you find those? So Alec, you had a good idea for this one, I think.
Sure, thanks, Kim. Yeah, I get my biggest frustration absolutely was not having access to 12 years of my laptop and 12 years of emails from my time at UNSW and then my time before that at other institutions. Look, I mean, if you're still in touch with your former employer, there may be somebody there who has a record of your attendance, like a general manager from the office or someone in finance. Somebody might be able to help and forward you an email of attendance confirmation. You know, equally, you may not be on speakies with them anymore, and that may be a dead end. But again, you know, as Danielle said, you might be able to get a letter from someone attesting that you had attended something or were part of a committee. But remember, somebody might be there to help. I guess my hot tip is never burn bridges. This is stay connected, and you know, people will try to help out.
Definitely. And I can confirm from the learning abroad standpoint that I emailed EAIE, NAFSA and API, all of them, because I didn't have those records for my own, and they were all very kind to come back and say, yep, I can confirm you attended these years. And of course, we are looking for attendance confirmation for evidence rather than just registration for a lot of things, because we need to know that you actually went. So another area that people are asking is, of course, if you're maybe new to the sector or you just don't have that many points as you start to add in your activities. So wanted to ask the panel what you thought you could do to boost your points, and you know, how does the fellowship help you in your career? So Danielle, do you want to start off on this one?
Yeah, sure. One of the things that was really beneficial for me, not only in getting points for my fellowship, but just in terms of my experience, is being on a committee. You know, you get so much out of being on a committee, but it also brings quite a lot of points as well. So I would, you know, speak to your manager, get some support. It's good, obviously, to have the support from your workplace to do that. But not only will it help you accumulate points, but it will also be very beneficial. I often talk to people who've been working in a similar job for a long period of time, and you know, talk about how much you benefit from being in that volunteer role. So I'm sort of become quite addicted to it, I suppose, you know, having many years of Ieaa, and I still hadn't had enough. And I'm now with Ieaa. I did convene a role for the Admissions and Compliance Network. Now I'm on the board. You know, I still keep up those involvements, even though I've been doing it for many years. So it's good at getting points, but it's also good for you professionally as well.
Great. Thanks, Danielle. And Beck, I think you also wanted to point out about transferable skills in that sort of area.
Yeah, I've got a couple of things to add. I guess, you know, this is not just advice for new people, but people like myself who are at a particular level and wanting to still accrue more points and get to the next level. We do forget that about transferable skills. This is something that we preach to students all the time, but, you know, it's tempting just to look specifically at activities in international education, but there might be other skills that you've accumulated or experiences that you've accumulated on the way that perhaps come from another industry but are relevant. I think for me, you know, the fellowship, especially now that I'm moving towards the next level, it really has acted as a bit of a, I guess, a compass, a professional development compass. So I'm now looking at all these different activities, ones that I've never done before. And for me, my engagement with the sector is something where I didn't have as many points as I did with education and experience. So the past couple of years I've been working on my engagement, and I've done, you know, some of you all know, I've done a lot of stuff with Ieaa as part of that. So I think using the activities table as a guide for things to aim for, and like Danielle said, perhaps those ones that have a bit more points is a really good idea. And I'd also, you know, say to the managers that might be here as well, this is a really good discussion to have with, you know, people that report through to you, because I think this is a really good opportunity to be strategic about professional development. You know, people wait to the end of the year for their performance reviews and talking about their career goals and such. But this is something that you can have an ongoing discussion, and maybe as an employee, you might say, look, I really want to achieve associate fellow status. And as a manager, you might be able to say, great, well, you know, pick some activities that you would like to do, and let's see how I can support you to do those. So yeah, I think this fellowship really does act as a bit of a pathway for where you can grow your career further.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thanks, Beck. Ellie, I noticed you nodding. Did you want to add something there?
I just wanted to kind of echo what Beck was saying about the transferable skills point, I suppose, particularly for, you know, a lot of newer staff members in international education or who've come over from other sectors. I know that many people in our sector, you know, come through from having an interest, obviously, in other cultures and language learning, and perhaps, you know, having studied overseas themselves, as many of us have. So one thing I've noticed as well that's been really useful is to see the transition, I guess, between, you know, if you're doing volunteering work, for example, already in many of the kind of bilateral youth organisations, so, you know, the Australia-Indonesia Youth Association or the Australia-China Youth Dialogue, and different groups as well that are active in this space. You know, a lot of that stuff can actually be counted, and then also looking at those transferable skills that you can count. So, you know, volunteering, mentoring, working in, you know, for some examples we had, you know, in Australia-Indonesia Youth Association, someone working as the education officer, promoting international education opportunities. You know, that's a volunteering activity. Kim, correct me if I'm wrong, but, you know, something that you could look to claiming points for as well. So things like that as well that are, you know, the transferable skills there, but looking back through what you've done already, which could be a way of kind of counting that towards your international education experience as part of the fellowship.
Great.
And just to throw in one more, Kim, working groups and committees. So there's often Ieaa are looking for people to be involved in working groups and committees, planning forums. You know, there's 150 points to get involved in one of those as well. And it's a good learning experience too.
Definitely. Thanks, Danielle. And of course, you know, we realize sometimes our committees and even the working groups can be a little bit competitive. So a few other things that people can think about are writing articles or blogs that are published in not just your own little blog world, but out into the Google world. So hopefully for a journal or even for IEAA, we're often looking for bloggers. So that can earn you some good points. Also joining the IEAA free webinars. Last year, particularly, we ran a lot, and we sometimes also award points for some of our member organizations. And while they are only 20 points each for your attendance at those, they are only an hour long, and the more you do, the higher those points build up. In fact, I just assessed a member who earned 360 points because he attended 18 different webinars over the last year. So it sounds like a lot, but when you spread it out over a calendar year, it's actually probably not that much, and likely that your managers would support something like that. So definitely remember that those points will add up as you attend more.
Can I add to that, Kim? Sorry,
Definitely.
as you were just saying, even though they're small points, something that I've personally benefited on from the past couple of years is when you're regularly attending these events and you're asking questions and you're engaging, you come up on people's radar. And because of that, I've then collaborated with people on other webinars to host or be a panelist or something like that. So I think it is a good idea. You might think it's only a couple of points, but when you're showing that you're committed and you're engaging more, then more opportunities open, and it's kind of this snowballing effect.
Yeah, that's a great point, Beck. And we're always looking, people do tend to see sometimes the same people again and again, I suppose. So the more that you can put yourself out there, then the more that, we are aware that you are interested. So I've just shared in the chat the email address. So if you do have questions as you're doing your fellowship, or you want to suggest some activities, that email address, the professional learning, is where you'd want to write. So make sure you note that, and I will show that again at the end of our slides later. Now, we do have a few other tips, I suppose, that we came up with that didn't necessarily fit into a particular category. So Beck, one that you had to share there?
Yeah, I just wrote, take a break from it. I think it took me a couple months to do mine, but I wasn't working on it every day. I just started, had a little bit of a break, and then I came back. And when I came back, I would always remember something that I had forgotten. And this is something that I think we all do, when we're on big tasks, we take ourselves out of it and then come back into it with a fresh set of eyes. I did want to just add something else as well that Ellie mentioned, a couple questions ago, that it's something that I do as well, is maintaining a master CV, a running CV. And I know this is not particularly helpful for people who are trying to retrospectively find their evidence and activities, but I think, from now moving forward, this is definitely a tip that I share with other people that I speak to, is keeping that master CV, loading all of the activities and project work and everything that you've done in there. I think mine's about 8 pages long at the moment. And then it's actually useful when you go for a job later on. You can just pick and mix what to use. But especially for the fellowship, you've just got this huge record of all the stuff that you've done.
Excellent. And Ellie, I think you had a sort of leading on from that point as well.
Yeah, definitely. So I think Alex sort of touched on it before as well, just looking at the idea of, using whichever cloud storage system you're using to kind of troll back through that and see, what evidence you can find. But I'd also add to that, I guess, as you're going, keeping all of the evidence, the pieces of evidence, but also kind of, excuse me, the master CV, these things that we're talking about, keeping them, in a Dropbox folder or, whichever kind of cloud storage you use. And the reason I say that is because, again, to kind of combat that sort of issue of going between jobs so much, going between devices so much as we all do now, but having it available wherever you are, so that you can be literally sitting on a, now that we're all commuting again for most of us, apologies Brisbane, but you can be sitting there actually on a train or on a tram and you've got a spare 15 minutes, you're just quickly uploading something, or you're like, I know that I was getting that last piece of evidence, where did I save that? Oh, you found it in your Dropbox on your phone, and then you go back to it when it's on your email on your desktop. So something like that as well, about using a good, just whichever system works for you, but having a good cloud storage as well. That was in the sort of gathering evidence phase. I think what I would say now about keeping track of events and evidence moving forward, because like Beck, I'm also trying to sort of get to that next level of fellowship. One thing that is just super helpful is that you've got the kind of track your activity tab in the fellowship page itself. So whenever I do something sort of, professional career related, and I think to track it, as Kim said, so the IEAA ones will be automatically tracked in there, which is really helpful. But then just thinking, oh, okay, so I spoke at an event last week about, Australia, Indonesia, something. I've just written a journal article about, education, adding those in as you go, just as a way of, for your own documentation, adding it to this CV, but then adding it to this. It's one of those things I think that feels time consuming at the time, but then later on, it's really helpful because it's all there and you're doing it as you go.
Excellent. Thanks, Ellie. Danielle, did you look like you wanted to say something or no?
No.
Okay. I know Alec has a point then. Yeah.
Yeah, I just have a quick point, and that's for those of you who've been made redundant or taken a VR or might be on that track. Try using the fellowship really as a motivator, and don't forget to stay connected. Keep your LinkedIn profile up to date, and perhaps build your skills and resilience by taking a CV or resume writing short course online. I was fortunate when I took a VR. My university provided me outsourced employability and resilience counseling. Not everyone has access to one-on-one career counseling like that, but there's some great resources out there. Like there's an online job readiness training program, which has step-by-step modules online to relaunching your career, interview skills, and useful tips. I guess just remember that the fellowship process is a journey, but can be another great feather to add to your CV for those who are transitioning their careers right now.
Thanks, Alec. And that's something that IEAA is actually looking at. We have some sessions that'll probably be coming up through the year at different events that touch on that, because we realize that 2020 was quite challenging for a lot of people in the sector job-wise. So it's definitely on our radar as well. And with the training point, I did want to mention that if you are doing training that's probably at least sort of a 1 to 2 hour online training, even at a reputable organization, we do recognize that often in the fellowship program under that certificate 1 to 4 category, which is 25 points. So if you are doing training that's relevant, then it is something that you can also add in, even if you're not currently working in the sector. Danielle, you look like you're ready to.
No, I think I think what it is more so, Kim, is just realising how incredibly organised some of our panellists are and how incredibly disorganised I am. I think it's more thinking how good they are at keeping their information and their record of what they're doing. So I've learned something too, what I should be doing perhaps a little bit better.
There you go. But it works for both organized and disorganized. And like the other points I just wanted to quickly make as well is we do understand and hear from people time to time that maybe your manager isn't aware of IEAA and the activities we do, or they're maybe not supporting you on this fellowship. And as Beck was pointing out, it can be a really great way to organize your professional development. But if you are struggling that way, we're always happy to speak to a manager to inform them, give them more information as to why it is beneficial, so that you don't feel you're alone in that, because we do want to see you participate in the program. So we're happy to support that if we can. We certainly do always talk to PVCIs and director levels, but we know that doesn't always filter down. And so that can be frustrating. So we're here to help you with that. And then the other point that people were saying about getting involved with IEAA, if you are interested in maybe trying to work with one of the networks or join a working group, do some research, write a blog, and aren't necessarily elected in our official elections, you can always email us at our admin email, so admin@ieaa.org.au, and just say, hey, look, I haven't been that involved, but I'm really keen, because like Danielle said, the networks, when they're planning forums, we often look for additional committee members, or there are working groups that pop up that we don't necessarily look publicly, and so we are happy to call on people who've let us know that they are quite interested. Thanks, Natasha, for putting the email in. All right, so that sort of comes to the end of our sort of formal questions, but I can see we have some great questions coming in from our participants. So I'm going to jump to those now. I'm sorry, I just have to pause while I read through them as well. So our certificates of completion and certificates gained from taking courses from one employer qualify as formal education. Courses like LinkedIn and Coursera. Okay, so that sort of goes to that point I was just making. Thanks, Raymond. Yes, we are happy to recognize LinkedIn Learning, or I think it was lynda.com, it used to be, that sort of thing, as long as it has a substantial amount of hours or engagement. So if it's a 15-minute course, we're not going to recognize it. But I would say if it's at least sort of a minimum 1 to 2 hours of course learning, then probably we could look at recognizing that into that certificate category. But again, we do want to see that it's supporting and relating to your work. So it's not about cake baking. It needs to be about something related to education and bettering yourself for a particular area of the sector. All right, and then Amy has asked about the time commitment required for the IEAA modules. So that's a great one. So when you sign up for an IEAA module, it's completely on your own time. You can take as long as you want. We have people who signed up, I think, right after they were launched and haven't finished them yet. Obviously, the longer you leave it, the less likely you probably are to finish it. So I would encourage you not to leave it too long, but no, it is completely self-paced and in your own time at this stage. All right, and then Julie has asked, given young professionals are usually relatively new to the sector, how would you suggest marketing or positioning the fellowship to encourage engagement uptake? So I might throw this to the panel because I think that they probably would have some thoughts on that. Anyone want to jump in with that one? So how you suggest marketing and positioning the
Come
fellowship?
in. I think this question came in probably before I already answered some of the other questions. But yeah, it's just I think, and I say this with my other cap on as the IEAA young professional, one of the young professional co-chairs here in Queensland. You know, at our recent event, I see lots of young professionals who are super eager, super enthusiastic to really, you know, learn more about the sector, contribute to the sector. So I think increasing that, you know, collaboration between them as young professionals and their managers and supporting them to achieve, you know, participate in those activities and achieve points towards their goal. I think that's really, you know, important for the young professionals to have that level of support from their supervisors and moving forward.
Great. Anyone else?
I was just going to say that I appreciated Beck's point earlier about professional development. So, you know, as a manager, if you're building that in with your staff, like sitting down whenever there's a performance review or, you know, at the start of a new contract of employment with a new staff member, putting that front and center and saying, did you know that actually, you know, there's this great program, let's start tracking your progress. It's not just good for you and for our organization and what you're doing, but obviously it's good for your career moving forward as well. So actually embedding it, you know, I think one of the, correct me if I'm wrong, Kim, but I think one of the goals of the fellowship to begin with was, you know, in an effort to sort of professionalize our sector as well and help people with their career trajectories. So I think that that's a really important part of it as managers, to be really embedding that in professional development plans.
Definitely. Thanks, Ellie. And I have to say, I do get some of the best ideas for adding activities from our young professionals. So I don't think you should be afraid to write to us if you have an idea. In fact, I spoke to someone yesterday who I think gave a really great suggestion. I do have to always take things to our professional development committee, who are made up of board members, to get their A-OK. But I think, you know, if you can really show that it's giving you a development factor, it has an international education frame around it, then there's no reason why we can't certainly consider it to add it as an activity. All right, and Margot has asked, can we count representation at international fairs, recruitment events, student engagement activities, projects to improve international experience, etc.? It doesn't appear to be a suitable category for these. So at this stage, if it's something that is related to your job, so if you are in marketing and recruitment, then no, we can't count that because we're looking to see people who are doing things beyond their day-to-day. You do get your 65 points for every year that you are working in the sector. So in that sense, it's recognized under that banner, but unless it's separate to what you're usually doing. So if you're working for a university, but then you go off and you're doing something on your own time, then we would not count those sorts of events. So if you launched, you know, your own event, you know, that's something we could certainly look at, but otherwise, no, we would not recognize those if they're part of your day-to-day. All right, and Nicola has asked, when you completed collating your evidence and points and are ready to be assessed, can you submit multiple times to IEAA with one payment if you're not approved the first time? That's a great question, Nicola. Thanks for that. Definitely. So once you've added all of your evidence and activities and you've reached the level that you want to be assessed at and paid your fee, it'll come to me or whoever's looking at them at the time. We'll review all of that. If some of the activities are actually discounted, so we don't think that they're eligible and we take them off and your points fall below the requirement for, say, 4,000 for an associate fellow, definitely we will, you know, you will have paid, we'll hold on to that and you can work at building that back up over time. We do try to remind people so they don't forget that they've already paid and, you know, need to add on, but we did have a few people who that happened to in the last year and they're definitely working to build that back up again. So yep, you've paid. We recognize that as long as you stay an IEA member, we can definitely keep going with your assessment there. All right, and Dan has asked, how have staff managed to transition in roles to new employers and identifying appropriate evidence? Okay, so I think hopefully, Dan, we answered that about, yeah, either reaching out to your old employers or going back to the organizations that ran those events, or potentially we did have a few cases where we were able to get stat decks because someone just couldn't find anything anywhere else. So as long as you have someone to sign your stat deck that's an independent, the PD committee is usually pretty open to recognizing that as a last resort. All right, and Harshini has asked, could we count some of our recent or previous development activity in the fellowship purposes? So I assume she means other professional development. So it depends on what it is, but I would say yes, obviously other organizations are running fantastic international education related development. So we'd be happy to recognize that, particularly if they're a organizational member or a sponsor of IEAA. A lot of them will offer different professional development opportunities, and they're typically recognized in various categories depending on what they are. Okay, so I was thinking about joining the fellowship on my own, as the university I work for is not on the partnership list. Is it possible to join as an individual? So definitely, like we said, just you have to be an IEA member, so you can sign up for an individual membership, which is currently $295. Once you're a member, yep, you can work through that fellowship at your own time, as long as you maintain your membership. But for those of you that do have organizational member universities that you're working at, a lot of them do have a list of people and they offer the membership. So you can just check in with us if you don't know who the admin is on that. They may have spots for you, and it's always worth asking because some of them have open spots that aren't being used, and that would be a shame to leave them, have them going to waste. So don't think it's just managers who get to be part of the organizational membership list. We definitely have lots of different levels of people. And the last question at the moment, unless anyone else sends some in, is from Kelsey. And she said, do you have any suggestions for volunteer opportunities? So I might throw that over to the panel if anyone's heard about some really great volunteer activities in this sector.
I'll just say, I think that my first port of call might be looking at some of the local study bodies like Study New South Wales, Study Melbourne, Study Adelaide. There's always activities happening. They're always looking for extra pairs of hands. Same as sometimes the City of Sydney or City Melbourne, if they're doing any welcome events or any harmony weeks or things like that. There would always be opportunities there. So I'd reach out to some of the known organizations and just see where they need a hand.
That's a great one, Alec. Thanks.
And the IEAA networks. So I think it depends on your area that you're sort of working in or interested in, but there are a number of networks, and networking itself is so important to get out there and meet different people and expand your network so you become aware of what opportunities might arise in the future. So, coming along to IEAA events and other events and getting to know people and expanding your network, and then when those opportunities become available. For example, we had a compliance meeting last week, a Victorian compliance meeting, and the IEAA convener for admissions and compliance came to the meeting, and she was looking for volunteers to participate in the next forum. So yeah, so going to meetings and expanding the network, and yeah, there's lots of opportunities out there. It's just a case of trying to find them, and depending on your area of interest, linking in with those people as well. So as sort of the areas that I work in are around compliance and student support. So if you wanted to reach out to me and if there are areas that you're interested in, but others on the panel have different areas of interest that they might be able to provide some ideas as well.
Thanks, Danielle. Ellie?
Yeah, I'd just add to that. I agree with what these guys have said so far, but I'd also add from conferences. So whether that's volunteering to assist in, committees or as, the kind of the registration desk, conference committees are always looking for volunteers. So again, aligning that with your interests, whether that's in learning abroad, you could help out at the Learning Abroad Forum later on. If it's in TNE, if it's in another marketing recruitment, finding whichever one aligns with your interests, but equally for academic conferences. So if there's an academic conference that's in international education or in a particular area that's related, as we've talked about before, so making sure that it's related. And yeah, volunteering to assist on the registration desk, to assist with speakers, speaker liaison. You might be fluent in a particular language and you can help as the liaison for that particular conference presenter. There's all sorts of ways that you can think about how to volunteer. So yeah, think outside the box again.
Excellent. And I was going to say as well, for what we talked a bit about young professionals, and if you're a bit intimidated, our young professionals network do networking events in all of the major states and territories and the big cities there. And at their networking events, they're often trying to have a short presentation or something like that. So if you have an idea for that, definitely reach out to our YP co-chairs. I'm just posting our LinkedIn group. If you're not a member of that and you believe you're sort of a young professional, whether it's young at heart, young in age, or young in career, that's a great place for you to also reach out to them, because they might be looking for someone to speak on a topic that you're an expert on. So don't be afraid to put yourself out there that way as well. And Susan's added a question there. Are there going to be future levels added beyond senior fellow? Well, that's a great question, Susan. And to be honest, I don't know, but I'm sure Danielle would love to keep going in her career path there. Senior fellow, we've had people joke. Look, it's something that I'm sure that IEAA is open to, just like with our modules. We're looking at developing new modules or more advanced modules. So I think it's not beyond the realm of possibility, but I wouldn't say it's in the works at the moment.
I'm keeping my points going just in case.
Excellent.
It's like Qantas Platinum 1.
Exactly. Any other questions coming in? We still have a few minutes if anyone still is a burning question. There's been some really great ones today. No? Okay, well, thanks to the panel. I think we're going to go ahead and share that slide again if we could, Natasha. So yeah, thank you so much everyone for your questions today. And so thank you so much to my panel of experts there sharing their story and their experiences. I do hope it's helped everyone move forward on their fellowship goals in 2021. Now, before you head off, please give us some feedback on the session via that quick poll that's up there now. And I also have a couple of upcoming event announcements while you're working on that. So next slide there. So first, I'm excited to share about AIEC 2021, which is going to be a hybrid event from October 5th to 8th, where you can meet, learn, share, network, and be part of the conversation with industry experts. AIEC 2021 will be an opportunity to meet with your peers in real life or virtually. Sessions will be broadcast live from the Gold Coast Convention Center. They will also be available on demand after the conference. Registrations are opening soon, so keep checking back on the AIEC 2021 webpage to stay up to date. And the call for proposals is going to open on Monday, the 19th of April, and it's a pretty short window. It's closing Friday, the 7th of May. So please visit the website in the chat for details about making proposals at AIEC for sessions. And lastly, I'm pleased to announce that we have 3 upcoming IEAA network forums. Registrations are open for scholarships and fellowships, admissions and compliance, and marketing and recruitment forums. You can see those dates there. They are all going to be held virtually due to the institutional domestic travel restrictions and uncertainty about borders. So we are going to look still at some hopeful face-to-face delivery where possible, and we are definitely committed to offering some state-based networking and gathering opportunities around these events. Our network conveners are looking to offer colleagues valuable, high quality, and timely session content. So keep checking our website for the session details and the timing for those events in terms of each day's time. And we hope to see you at some of those network forums in 2021. So thank you again, everyone, for today. Upcoming there is that email address again, if you ever have any questions or anything. But thank you once again to Alec, Danielle, Beck, and Ellie for your time. I truly appreciate it. And I appreciate everyone who attended today and had a listen, and look forward to seeing your fellowship applications come through. So thank you, everyone. Hope you have a great afternoon.
Very much.
Thank you.